Okay, let's just get everything all set up. Okay. En gaan we opname. Nee, Ausgabe. Ja, alles klar. Okay, hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel for our weekly stream. That didn't make sense. I'm streaming here every Friday and Saturday from about 11:30 to about 1 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, or Eastern Standard Time, depending on what time of year it is. We play some chess, we do some Geoguessr, we occasionally dunk on reactionaries, and we talk about all sorts of interesting AnCom stuff that might come to mind. just test this out. Make sure that Restream is forwarding all the chat stuff, and yes, it is. Okay, we can cut down on bandwidth. I've got the links for all this stuff already. Okay. Start out with a little bit of chess. Been having a very good day with puzzles. Let's see if I can get back over 1700. Just as we start out and wait to see if and when anyone else might show up. Puzzle. Okay, so what's happening here? Okay, the Darkscar Bishop is obviously attacked. One option would be to take, but then you take, and it just takes back with the that knight, and I haven't actually really gained anything. Okay, that wasn't. This is the order. Knew it was going to be this. Didn't quite get the order right. Not the most propitious start. And we win a queen. Okay. Awkward sort of situation here. There's a definite mating threat. Okay, what happens? Yeah, no. No, I can't take the bishop because the knight here is guarding. So then that's just mate. What if we suck this rook? What happens then? What happens then is that was wrong. Okay. That sucked. Okay. Didn't think so, but I'm running out of ideas. Oh, okay, we're trading queens. Okay. Okay, this is black to move. Now, I can take the queen, and then my queen gets taken. And then I end up actually down a piece, so I'm not thinking that I want to do that. But I can do that, and I'm up a queen. Okay. And that's mate. Okay. I was doing much better on this earlier today. Actually, I wanted to share something with you that I found just from the comments of a video I was watching earlier today. Let me pull this up. Actually, there's a visual aid I also need to pull up. Let me get that too. Get out of puzzles, since puzzles are not being nice to me at the moment. And let me see. First of all, okay, reaction photo. Let me see if I can find. Yeah. Speech adult. That's what I was looking for. I want to pull this up. And let me just find this. Okay. As it turns out, I'm just going to look into this as well. I haven't actually had time to just completely be sure about it.
From the internet, but yeah.
Believe what you're saying.
This is in the comments to a Surf's video about the latest marketing campaign from Caleb Maupin, just in time for his book to come out about how BreadTube serves imperialism, you see. He has announced that BreadTube is trying to assassinate him. That's not... There's nothing at all convenient about that time. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Shoot. Just making absolutely sure that I'm looking at the right thing. Okay, yes. So far it's checking out. Jury. Okay. So, yeah, okay, this does check out. So, let me just need to move these tabs over. Group tabs. Now, we're gonna just have a look. I'm not gonna play the, don't worry, I'm not gonna play the entire speech over, and that's once is enough for that. It's really does not bear repeating. What is interesting, though, is if we look at these interesting fellows that he's sitting next to, of which we've got Julien Rochdy of the Fascist National Front. France, another far-right French figure right there, the gray-haired fellow, that's Emmanuel Leroy Ladurie. Here, we can show you the pictures. And then we've also got another, let me see, what was he involved in? Let me just check. This is Leonid Savin, and he's of Nouvelle Droite, another French far-right group. So, yeah, so he's surrounded himself with Russian and French fash, and Russian-French fash here. I mean, a lot of people recognize Dugin. Dugin was actually the only one I recognized. Nobody else had really looked into these other people, at least, and I hadn't recognized them. But I'm just gonna have to give a little hat tip to Rika in the Surf's comment thread, who pointed all this out. I had not recognized any of these people. But, yeah, looking at the pictures, it definitely checks out. So, basically, it is not just him with one fascist and a bunch of innocuous people. It is a room full of fascists. Mostly French, with a little bit of overlap with Russia. So, yeah, that's the kind of company he happily keeps and sucks up to. I just thought that it would be a good idea to bring that up, since that was pointed out. And since it checks out, now, if you were wondering about these other people, I kind of had been. I didn't recognize any of them. Yeah, so we've got from left to right, and in this case, even the farthest left is still way on the right. We've got Julien Rochdy, Leonid Savin, Alexandre Dugin, Caleb Maupin, and Emmanuel Leroy Dingsbums Ladurie. Bloody long name. All fash, all the time. So, yes. I wonder if he's going to talk about that in his book about Bread Tomb and the conveniently timed announcement that there's this supposed plot to assassinate him. Yeah, somehow I don't think so. It's interesting. He plays sort of interesting double game, because if you remember, for when we were looking at his speech to the fascist Eurasian movement, his presentation, his entire political presentation, is totally different depending on what kind of audience he's with. When he's talking to naive leftists, who he wants to make think he's an authority on communism and Marxism and all this, he talks one way. When he's talking to just fash, he completely changes his entire presentation, his entire political identification. Suddenly, he doesn't want to say anything about communism. He wants to, or just the smallest bit he can get away with, and instead talk about, Huey Long and how he's a populist. He's I mean, I really think that this is a very deliberate marketing ploy on his part. It seems like every single bit about the way he does these things is in the absolute worst of faith. So, okay, I just wanted to update you on that since somebody pointed it out, and pointed out also that so few people seem to be mentioning it. So, now we know a little bit more about the sort of people he hangs out with at Nazbol conferences. Good to know. I'm just making sure that I've actually got... that I'm not missing anyone in chat. I am not. So, now, it's another thing I want to talk about, because lately there's been this repeat. It's interesting that there's sort of all these remakes in the movies and in television shows and also in far-right propaganda campaigns. Because, see, when I was growing up, when I was in high school in the 90s, there was this huge outrage mostly around Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, and this idea that maybe there might be, honesty in U.S. history classes in schools. It just absolutely had all the right-wingers beside themselves. They were absolutely freaking out about this. And now, 30 years later, they're doing it again, except now they've decided to use the term critical race theory, which they're just using to mean lying to kids in history class a little less than is standard in the U.S. And it reminded me of a really great book that's really worth reading that I wanted to just recommend to everybody here. It's out of print. It's by Lawrence J. Friedman. It was written in the 1970s. Let me see this. Yeah, there we go. And I've got two cameras now, so I'm trying to make sure that I'm... it's called Inventors of the Promised Land, as you just saw. And what it's about is all this U.S. mythology, like the cult of personality around the so-called founding fathers and all this other shit that makes history class in the U.S. an absolute, torture session for anyone who actually knows anything about U.S. history. And he goes through the origin of this cult of personality around, say, George Washington, who was literally... let me just read you some of the stuff. Let me just read you this. I was just going through this again because it's been so long since I read it. Let me see... Yes, the chapter is called The Flawless American, the Invention of George Washington. The first thing to know is he goes into the way that they talked about George Washington while he was still president. George Washington had not always been exalted. Before his death on December 14th, 1799, he was sometimes the victim of biting criticism. In 1776, for example, a tutor in the Washington household claimed that he was awkward, clumsy, and dull. 20 years later, Thomas Paine publicly ridiculed Washington as pompous, treacherous, and a hypocrite. Some Virginians toasted a speedy death to General Washington, while a Pennsylvania anti-federalist tried to prove that the founding father was a common thief. Following Washington's farewell address, a group of congressmen refused to vote their thanks to the retiring president. The editor of the Philadelphia Aurora announced that Washington's retirement would end political iniquity and corruption in the land. Okay, that's a sort of a flavor. But then, suddenly after he dies, what do we get? By 1815, a European traveler called Paul Svidin, which sounds Russian, possibly, reported that every American considers it his sacred duty to have a likeness of Washington in his home, just as we have the images of God's saints. While the fictional, the Washington is described as, let me see, basically just as a flawless, as a literal demigod. They just go into this whole thing to the extent that it was really kind of confusing to these Washington hagiographers. This is right after his death. How he could turn out to be mortal, because they'd established that he was literally flawless, that he was a demigod. It's absolutely just off the hook, and it really gives you some insight into the sort of cultural broth that we're all stewed in this country, when you think about all of that. And how, really, when you think about it, actually kind of, it seems like North Korea was kind of ripping their cult of personality off of us. I thought about, I didn't have time to do it, but I thought about doing sort of a little game where I would have some quotes, and it would just be, who's it about, Kim Il-sung or George Washington? And it was going to be hard, because the level of the oratory around Washington, the whole cult that they started then and that really lives on now to our great misfortune, is really on that level. So the book is Inventors of the Promised Land. I got it secondhand since it's out of print. I got it for like 50 cents 15 years ago. I imagine you can probably find it out online for cheap, and if you can't, I highly recommend getting it. You will not regret it. It is a very nice insight into why the political culture is just so completely fucked up in this country. One of the things that also just kind of comes to mind when I look at that is the way there's this, when a horrible person is in office in the U.S., like George W. Bush. Yeah, a lot of people aren't old enough to remember what the discourse was like around George W. Bush when he was president. So let me just give you an idea. I mean, he was just described quite accurately, considering the kind of just absolute human rights innovations he was doing, like forced disappearance of persons within the U.S. as just an officially acknowledged practice. Maintaining an international network of concentration camps that we still have today, and all sorts of other lovely things. And you even had, at one point, Foreign Policy, with the most mainstream journal of foreign policy available, saying, hopefully at least China might be able to stop the global rampage of George W. Bush. Yeah. Which, again, I mean, and that's valid considering what he was doing. He was an absolute war criminal. And then the minute he left office, suddenly, first it was, we're going to look forward and not backward. That was Obama's thing. And then there was just sort of a few years where we didn't hear about him. And then he gets reborn as a as a portrait painter. And, as somebody who Ellen DeGeneres thinks that it's okay to be seen palling around in public with. And we're supposed to be nostalgic about the golden age under George W. Bush compared to Donald Trump. And when you hear that, having lived through the way that they talked about George W. Bush, it really fills you with a lot of expectation around what they're going to be saying about Donald Trump in a few years. I mean, you already kind of can sense he's not being prosecuted. All the liberals were just convinced that he was going to get prosecuted. I need to just turn my camera on again. Liberals were convinced he was going to end up in prison. He was going to get prosecuted, and that isn't happening. That's not even being discussed. In fact, right now, the Biden administration's more interested in going to court to defend the right to just deny Puerto Ricans access to the disability benefits they pay for, and to investigate how some data about just how easy it is for the rich to just legally dodge tax to be to get away with it. Meanwhile, there's this new anti-terrorism strategy, which is really should make us all just feel quite relieved, of course, that organizing is going to be so much easier under Biden, because it lumps anarchists and socialists together with neo-Nazis and militias as terrorist movements. And in case you didn't hear about it, you need to pay attention to, we all need to be paying more attention to and talking more about what's going on in Minneapolis. Because it is kicking off there. The cops are not happy with what happened in court today, with Derek Chauvin being sentenced to 22.5 years for murder. I mean, there are people who get more than that for weed. There are people who are doing life for weed. But any time, I mean, they were already pissed off that he got prosecuted in the first place. And there's just a complete media blackout around that, so it would be a good idea for us to be talking about that a bit more and sharing it. If you look at Olasm, O-L-A-A-S-M on Twitter, he reliably has stuff on there, and there are a lot of other people, like Unicorn Riot also fairly reliably has stuff about what's going on there currently, so it's definitely worth talking about. And let me see. With that, I reckon I'm going to switch back over and play a little bit of chess. I've been learning a new system. There's a great book that I picked up called The Dynamic English by Tony Costin, since I play the English. And he has one system in there that I'm having some pretty good results with called the Botvinnik system. And so I've been getting some really good results, so let's see if we can continue that. Let's get that music back on. Okay, let's have a rapid, and let's get that chat window where it's visible, just in case we have some people show up. Well, I play a version of it with white too, so sod it. Okay. So, now we go. Knight G to E7. This does get occasionally played with black, according to the book, and I've gotten results with it that way, so we're going to just keep on with that, okay? So, we've got this nice little structure here. This is the centerpiece of it, and the goal is to get control over, in this case, the D4 square. If you're playing white, it's the D5. So, here, this is our lead target. Now, waiting for white to play bishop e3, which is not going to happen. Okay. What do I want to do there? Not actually interested in trading away this bishop just yet, though I would very much like to trade away the light square bishop, white's light square bishop here. Well, actually, I'd be more interested in trading the dark square bishop. It's a light square bishop when you're playing, with white. Okay, castle. Now, it would be a very bad idea indeed to try to take on F2 on F7 with that queen, because I just take the queen and take the knight, and I'm very happy indeed, because I was also kind of hoping to take okay. So we're getting ready to push to play D4 here. And I'm going to open up this F file. Attack this queen. And what's it going to do? And got knight on d4, threatening, amongst other things, this. Nice little fork. And I think we're probably going to see a trade here, which I don't mind at all. Okay, how do I want to do this? Yeah, I think that's better. Rook is still defended because I've got that bishop. Yeah, I kind of expected that. Fine. You gotta watch out on this diagonal now, annoyingly. Speak of the devil. Now, gotta be a little bit careful. Is there some back rack potential going on here? Okay. The nice thing, I mean, this is a weird little structure I've got at the moment, and it's not what I was really going for, but on the other hand, it does kind of make the center a little bit less navigable. Takes it, I can have the rook. Doesn't, I can have that pawn. Right, thank you. And now this bishop's hanging. And the nice thing about a light square bishop in this case is that my pieces, with the exception of my queen, are all on dark squares. And, well, this pawn that I'm pushing to promote. Well played. Okay. Let's do one more.
I only speak for myself here, but I find
No. I don't want to hear this crap again.
for me.
That's not where we're doing this. Okay.
You don't say it. All that I 100% know about 9/11 is that there are some things about.
Oh, what the? Where was that? Must be some other window here. That'll be why. Yeah, got it. Oh, okay, we're gonna get politics out of sports. Yeah, okay, PragerU.
Pro sports has become woke sports, and that's a problem. Not just
Okay, so there's less racism in sports, and that's a problem.
for athletics, but for all of us. Sport has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It is more powerful than government.
Wait a second. I mean, okay, this is supposedly quote. I mean, what's the ellipsis doing in there? Who is he quoting somebody?
In breaking down racial barriers. It laughs in the face of all types of discrimination. Nelson Mandela spoke those words.
Yeah, Nelson Mandela also knew perfectly well what racism in sport and segregation in sport actually were, because that was kind of what apartheid was all about as well. Apartheid also applied to sport, which is why the Springboks, the rugby team in South Africa, is still very much associated with white racism there. But yeah, I mean, it's really cute when they when reactionaries at PragerU decide to quote Nelson Mandela out of context. I mean, they're, for one thing, these are the same people who opposed him at the time for the most part. You know, they backed Reagan, and Reagan was very much a supporter of the apartheid regime in South Africa. And, of course, they don't want to mention the thing, why Nelson Mandela was locked up for 27 years. Because the thing is, he was locked up for 27 years because he refused to condemn the armed struggle of the ANC. That was the deal. That was the situation. He was in there for 27 years because they wanted him to distance himself and condemn and call for an end to the armed struggle against the racist regime in South Africa, and he refused. And, well, that's not something that has any contemporary relevance, is it? But I'm sure, you know, PragerU, I'm sure they're gonna bring that up at some point in this.
The Nobel Peace Prize recipient understood the power of sports to bring disparate people together. There is no better example of this than the famous victory of South Africa's mixed-race team in the 1995 Rugby World Cup. Mandela's presentation of the Winners' Trophy to team captain Francois Pienaar stands as an iconic symbol of unity in post-apartheid South Africa.
Yeah, where unity still doesn't fucking exist because now that's apartheid by other means. The white fuckers who got rich off of apartheid are still rich now. That was one of the things that the ANC ended up agreeing to.
Sports have served as a powerful racial unifier in America as well. This is not new.
Really? When?
It goes back decades. In 1936,
You mean like back when they were segregating baseball?
the great black sprinter and long jumper Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals at the Berlin Olympics. In 1930,
Yes, and he specifically made a point, and it pissed off Hitler. Because the whole point of the 1936 Olympics, from the point of view of the host country, that's Nazi Germany, was to prove, the superiority of the Aryan race and all this. And so when Jesse Owens ended up kicking their asses at in running, Hitler actually refused to even be there for the medal ceremony. So, I mean, that is kind of where we are when right-wingers feel the need to show us just how outraged they are that professional athletes have something to say about the fact that the police just have this habit of just assassinating random black people, or otherwise expressing a political view. Because Jesse Owens actually also was quite political about what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he was quite happy with it. And judging, and a lot of people actually, I mean, the way it's always presented in every history book also points out the obvious political dimension of what happened there, and the fact that Hitler refused to even be present for the medal ceremony. So, another bad example to be bringing up.
The great black boxer Joe Louis scored a first-round knockout over German heavyweight Max Schmeling. The Owens and Lewis
fucking hell. Yeah, another example that you should try to avoid bringing up if you're trying to make the point that you should get politics out of sports.
Hitler's Aryan superiority myth.
Okay, I thought you said to get politics out of sports. Now you're bringing it in there? You'd make up your mind.
Unified black and white Americans in pride and celebration.
Yeah, citation needed.
And established Owens and Lewis as America's first black national heroes. Jesse Owens and Joe Louis laid the foundation for Brooklyn Dodgers general manager Branch Rickey's partnership with black baseball legend Jackie Robinson.
Yeah, also, yeah, granting that Owens and Lewis were supposedly America's first black national heroes. I'll grant that for a second, but isn't that already in itself a little bit political? Because they certainly weren't the first prominent black figures, and they certainly weren't the first prominent black figures to visibly make a stand in some way or another against racism. But the ones apparently that white people were okay with uniting around, according to this version of history, are the ones who were doing feats of athleticism for white people's entertainment.
To integrate Major League Baseball in the late 1940s.
Yeah, that's right. It was just it was just sort of a friendly decision. There wasn't any strife over the idea of ending the segregation of Major League Baseball.
That, in turn, inspired Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and the civil rights movement of the 1950s.
Jesus, okay, I see. I thought what inspired the civil rights movement in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s until today was the fact that, black people were being denied civil rights and living in a racist regime. But PragerU clearly knows better. That's why they get that U there, because they're a real university and not just a bullshit YouTube channel funded by oil billionaires. So yes, obviously they decided to fight for civil rights because sports.
Barack
Civil
Obama
wars.
credited Robinson for his political rise. There's a direct
Oh, so this is getting politics out of
line
sports?
between Jackie Robinson and me standing here, said America's first black president.
So okay, I'm still missing the bit where we were getting politics out of
Obama
sports. Now.
saw what Mandela saw, how sports transcends all barriers.
Except that's the whole point is that there was a barrier within sports that Jackie Robinson had to transcend. So maybe it wasn't sports so much transcending all barriers because otherwise that barrier wouldn't have existed in the first place.
When you see this group of folks of different shades coming from different communities and then playing as one team and celebrating each other and being joyous in that, that tells us something about America.
Okay, and I just have to say it's kind of telling that Barack Obama is now the go-to like quote mining source for PragerU to debunk anti-racism. That tells us a lot about Obama's legacy.
Sports, in other words, is the ultimate equalizer. In competition, what matters is winning. That means excellence matters, and both are colorblind. Sport.
Yeah, right. Which is why Colin Kaepernick can't get a job, just because he decided to protest the fact that this regime is murdering random black people and with complete impunity.
Allow us to experience the power of pure meritocracy. The only way to govern.
Pure meritocracy, my ass. I mean, the only reason there was a barrier for Jackie Robinson to overcome so that you could make your bullshit point there was because it wasn't meritocracy, because meritocracy is bullshit.
Sports and the only way to govern life. But now, all this storied history and the positive message of sports are being undone. In September 2016, NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick took a knee. That is.
Okay, so the history of the civil rights movement is being done by a football player taking a stand against racism?
Used to stand during the national anthem. His defenders say his protest wasn't about the flag.
Well, yes, and he also said his protest wasn't about the flag. He was very, very specific about what his protest was about. Although, also, fuck the flag.
But Kaepernick said otherwise. I am not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's more to it than the... Yeah, that's right. You put flag in sort of an orange, font color, but that doesn't change the fact that he said more than that, and he actually said a whole lot more than that.
He told the press. We all know what happened next.
Yeah, what happened next is that politics was so far out of sports that he got blacklisted.
Players across the NFL followed Kaepernick's lead, kneeling, locking arms, and even raising fists during the national anthem.
Well, yes, in the best tradition of Jackie Robinson and Muhammad Ali. And, I mean, we were talking about overcoming barriers through sport, weren't we, a few minutes ago? You know? So it seems like there's some barriers you don't want to overcome there.
Then athletes from other sports joined in. Ironically,
oh, that's terrible.
Just as sports has the power to unite, we have discovered it also has equal power to divide.
Okay, so the division, right. So the idea here is that there was no pre-existing division or anything like that led white people in particular, led right-wing white people especially, to freak out over the idea of athletes protesting racism before the game during the sacred fucking national song. The division was, it just suddenly came out of nowhere.
On opening day 2021, Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred stripped Atlanta of the All-Star game as punishment for Georgia politicians' passage of a voter integrity bill.
A voter integrity bill, yes, also known as a vote suppression bill. Fuck voting, but if you're going to have voting and you're going to pretend that it's a way to legitimize your system, you gotta let everybody do it. And these racist voter ID bills, on this fake claim of that there's some sort of massive amount of voter fraud that somehow all these investigations have never found a single example of. Yeah. A voter integrity bill. Fuck off.
Now into the political mob that cast half of America as racist, the move fractured.
Really? So I didn't realize it was half of America that supported racist voter suppression bills. But if that's true, then what, are we not supposed to point out that they're racist? Is it a secret? Like, the NSA spying on us?
Baseball's fan base. The entire American sports world, a culture that celebrated victors, colorblindness, and patriotism.
Yeah. Fuck off,
has
Jesus.
immersed itself in victimization and left-wing radicalism.
Okay, it's radical to suggest that maybe racist extrajudicial executions by the state and denying people the right to vote based on their racial background are left-wing radicalism now. It gets easier and easier to be a left-wing radical in this fucking country. Okay? I mean, just look at if you want to see an example of it, look at what Bernie Sanders says that gets him branded as a radical, and then go back and read what Dwight David Eisenhower said on the same fucking subject. It gets easier and easier to be branded as a left-wing radical in this fucking country.
This immersion threatens permanent damage both to American sports and to the larger American culture. Once again, Kaepernick takes the lead. He no longer plays football.
That wasn't his choice. He was blacklisted.
He is now a professional influencer. He hawks his political message in partnership with Nike.
Oh, I thought, wait a second. I thought, okay, so I thought that freedom of speech was one of the things that PragerU's extremely sort of muddled politics stood for. And since when is corporate money something that PragerU is against? Assuming that this is even true, which it's PragerU. So verify before citing, obviously. But, since when are they against any of this stuff? I mean, these people are spreading a fucking political message, and they're taking huge amounts of money from oil billionaires.
The $40 billion a year puppet master of American sports.
The 40 billion? What the fuck is this?
Kaepernick, LeBron James, and Nike's other brand influencers are making millions off amplifying racial wounds.
See, what amplifies the racial wounds is talking about it, not the fact that the wounds are constantly being reopened, say, by cops just going around fucking murdering people like they did. 2 BLM activists got murdered just recently in Minneapolis, and that is basically no national news coverage of it.
It's a cynical and brilliant business strategy.
As opposed to taking money from oil billionaires in order to produce condescending videos of just garbage politics that don't even make sense on their own terms, which is apparently not cynical. That's just pure idealism.
It explains why pro sports, especially the National Basketball Association, seem more concerned about how they are perceived in China than they are here in America.
Again, citation
China
needed.
is a huge market. Its 1.4 billion citizens have more sneaker spending power than America's 333 million.
Wait, they're saying, okay, this is interesting. First of all, apparently markets are, PragerU is saying that corporations wanting to make money is bad, and also China citizens have greater buying power than... just because they make the shoes doesn't mean they can fucking afford them. I mean, from people who I've known who've taught English in China, one could say it's worth noting that the prices are so low that $1,000 a month goes extremely far. Whereas these shoes go for like $100. Most people do not have the fucking money to buy $100 pair of sneakers there. And it's an import, so it's
math.
expensive.
The $8 billion a year NBA is the marketing arm of Nike's $40 billion a year global business.
So, wait, okay, I thought we were getting politics out of sports, so we're getting capitalism out of sports? Okay, I'm all for it. Yeah, that's right, get Nike out of there. Fuck them, they use sweatshops and slave labor and shit. So, yeah, I mean, wow, who would have thought PragerU is coming out against capitalism in sports?
To state it plainly, Nike is driving American sports. That's why team owners, coaches, and players are so willing to call America racist.
Okay, so the idea here is that nobody would have come up with the idea that the U.S. is at all racist if Nike hadn't decided for some reason to say so. What the fuck did I just hear?
Silent on China's egregious treatment of its minorities and suppression of freedom in Hong Kong.
Oh. You mean sort of like you want people to remain silent about racism in the U.S. while at the same time trumpeting the crimes of official enemies that nobody here can do anything about anyway, and that nobody in power is going to do anything about.
Ultimately, the fans hold the power. They buy the tickets, the shoes, and the merchandise. Watch what they do. If they accept sports as just another arena to fight political battles, you'll know dark days are ahead.
Yeah, and of course.
If they reject it, we'll be headed back to a brighter future. I'm Jason Whitlock for Prager University.
God, I mean, that there is no more discrediting way to identify yourself, to introduce yourself, than those 4 words. 5 words. What time is it now? Okay, it's after 1, so I guess it's time for me to wrap it up.
This video was made possible by a generous donation from the T.W. Lewis Foundation.
T.W. Lewis Foundation. Well, before we go, I just want to look this up. T.W. Lewis Foundation. Who's that? Oh, Dennis Prager blurbed them about us. Oh, investments. Let's see, where's the money? Where are they investing? Yeah, well, they're investing in land. Oh, so this is land banking. Well, here's just a note. Well, too late for me to actually go and do a deep dive on this, but T.W. Lewis Foundation, that's a name to keep in mind. You probably hear it in other places. Another piece of the Right Wing Foundation network. And with that, I'm just going to sign off. Have a good rest of your night, and I'll be seeing you tomorrow. This has been the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. Ciao.